I do not recall where Brain Police posted this, but Spock made a beautiful video cutting him up on it, and Brain Police in the comments section didn't deny that he wrote it. So from Brain Police's action, I assume he wrote what I'm going through and critiquing. Starts off, the naive realist relies on the notion of a metaphysical realm independent of human experience in order to justify meaning, truth, and morality. They feel that without this, these things cannot be justified, and hence they rely on it in order to try to refute the skeptic. Well, here's the Wikipedia definition of naive realism. Naive realism, also known as direct realism or common sense realism, is a common sense theory of perception. Naive realism claims that the world is pretty much as common sense would have it. All objects are composed of matter, they occupy space, and have properties such as size, shape, texture, smell, taste, and color. These properties are usually perceived correctly. A little bit further down it says, the naive realist theory may be characterized as the acceptance of the following 5 beliefs. 1. There exists a world of material objects. 2. Statements about these objects can be known to be true through sense experience. 3. These objects exist not only when they are being perceived, but also when they are not perceived. The objects of perception are largely perception independent. 4. These objects are also able to retain properties of the types we perceive them as having, even when they are not being perceived. Their properties are perception independent. 5. By means of our senses, we perceive the world directly and pretty much as it is. In the main, our claims to have knowledge of it are justified. Okay, so Brain Police's definition of naive realism is clearly and unambiguously wrong. And this surprised me a little bit, just how clearly and unambiguously he got naive realism wrong. Brain Police continues. The nihilist relies on the fact that these things, meaning, truth, and morality, do not exist independently of the realm of human experience in order to attempt to nullify them, as if the lack of a God's eye view logically leads to the conclusion that life has no meaning, existential nihilism, that there is no truth, epistemological nihilism, and that there is no good or bad, moral nihilism. This is, of course, a non sequitur that relies on the metaphysical assumptions of the naive realist. No. Let me try to illustrate why this is wrong with an analogy. If I said we all have muses, a muse for creativity, a muse for energy, and our muses rise and fall, and these muses don't exist physically but are just a conceptualization of human experience, you would be right in being a muse nihilist. Would this make you anti-conceptual? No. Just because someone denies your concepts doesn't make them anti-conceptual. I've made videos on moral nihilism, Spock and Neon have, and we're just fine with conceptualizing human experience. Emotions, thoughts, desires, subjective value, these are all concepts which, as far as we're concerned, are not discrete physical entities. Also, Brain Police, we can see here, and he does it throughout the entire essay, he conflates existential, epistemological, and moral nihilism. And I'm only going to be defending moral nihilism. Brain Police continues. Despite the disagreements between their ultimate conclusions, there is a common denominator between the naive realist and the nihilist. They both rely on the duality between the realm of experience and the realm of reality independent of experience to draw either an affirmative or negatory conclusion. No, just because you believe in a concept such as emotion doesn't mean you're appealing to another realm. Also, naive realism doesn't appeal to another realm either. Neither moral nihilism nor naive realism appeal to another realm. BP continues. The naive realist thinks that without meaning, truth, and morality being justified by the metaphysical realm of experience independence, they are nullified. I think this is false. Ayn Rand was a naive realist, and she was certainly a very big fan of meaning, truth, and morality. I don't think naive realism necessarily denies the concepts of meaning, truth, and morality. Naive realism, unless I'm missing something, appears to be just a metaphysical claim that says nothing about the concepts that Brain Police puts forward here. BP continues. The nihilist wholeheartedly agrees with this. except they conclude that they are indeed nullified because they cannot be justified via appeal to the same metaphysical realm. In this sense, the nihilist is just the negative side of a shared metaphysic. Okay, first off, naive realists don't necessarily believe morality is bunk, so it wouldn't be agreement. It could be. I mean, I could agree with some naive realist who is also a moral nihilist, but that's not necessarily the case, as you're making it out to be. This statement is muddled by using morality. You certainly have feelings of and a sense of justice, but you can't derive an ought from this. Oddly, Brain Police changed the accusation in mid-essay from calling moral nihilists anti-conceptual in principle to a correct charge that moral nihilists claim morality cannot be justified via appeal to a human experience. But he changed the accusation in the middle of this thing. BP continues. In this way, the nihilist is the logical outcome of the metaphysics that was previously proposed by the naive realist. The inherent epistemological problems with reliance on such a metaphysic, particularly as it was introduced by Kant, produces nihilism or extreme skepticism, and not skepticism of the Pyrrhonian type, but of a Cartesian type. Meaning, truth, and morality can no longer be thought of as intrinsic properties of an experience-independent realm, or as a matter of correspondence to this realm. Hence, the foundation for these things that naive realism clings to collapses. The result is despair in light of the failure of the Enlightenment for some, and a passive acceptance of nihilism for others. Okay, first off, I don't deny quantum mechanics in principle. Also, I don't think Kant was a naive realist. It's just that he thought humans couldn't have knowledge of things outside of mathematics, or were beyond their senses. That is, humans couldn't understand things that were supersensory. And if me, Spock, and Neon were Cartesian skeptics, we wouldn't even be making videos to you. Pyrrhonian skepticism is just irritating and unreasonable badgering. And of course, meaning, truth, and morality cannot be independent of experience. That's just retarded, right? Show me a bottle of meaning, an ingot of truth, or a single morality particle. And sure, a feeling of meaning, which is just an emotion, corresponds to the behavior of neurons and synapses and all that brainy stuff. So yes, it does. So yes, experience-independent stuff does correspond with experience-dependent emotions and feelings of meaning. And naive realism doesn't deny meaning, truth, and morality. And even if naive realism did necessitate that those things didn't exist, oh well. Like, I don't see where this collapse comes from, unless you think that not having meaning, truth, and morality is a collapse. Brain Police continues. It would be mighty convenient for the nihilist if the analysis were to stop here, though. The problem is that the nihilist is just as wrong as the naive realist in the fundamental assumptions that the two share, namely that an experience-independent metaphysic is required for meaning, truth, and morality to be justified, and that the realm of human experience is somehow subordinate or empty of meaningful and reliable content. No, that's not a position I hold. Again, thoughts and emotions are valid concepts as far as I'm concerned. BP continues. While it could be said that nihilism is simply the more logical position within the confines of these assumptions, if one rejects those assumptions, then one has no reason to be a nihilist any more than a naive realist. Both positions depend on the same broken philosophical tradition. Both the naive realist and the nihilist make fallacious claims to totality or absolutism. Only one is an affirmative absolute and the other is a negative absolute. Right, but nobody here is working within those assumptions. Neither me, Spock, or Neon are denying concepts pertaining to human experience. You're literally just making stuff up. Brainpolice continues. The nihilist simply ignores or dismisses the human condition, often in a way that amounts to little more than rationalization of their personal attitudes toward life. This is clearly false. My nihilists don't necessarily dismiss human condition, right? We're just fine with concepts pertaining to human experience. But the second is also false. But I know, Brain Police, I know what you did. You had a few encounters with Caligula and presumed that all moral nihilists were dismissive of the human condition, which Caligula himself is not. Right? As much as it may seem that way superficially, he's not. I mean, he puts on kind of a cynical front, but he's not. He doesn't dismiss the human condition. Brainpolice continues. The realist intuition seems to be correct in the sense that the use of meaning, truth value, and morality is an unavoidable part of the human condition that we experience and partake in all the time. Okay, here is where you conflate those three concepts as if they were a package deal. Here's where that becomes very problematic. I'm fine with truth value. Yeah, I'm fine with truth value. I don't want to get into that. I'm fine with truth value, not with morality. But I'm not sure about meaning yet. These are three separate concepts, and you're conflating them is very ham-fisted and only serves to obfuscate. BP continues, but the way in which we do this when we aren't doing philosophy has little to do with reliance on an experience-independent metaphysic. On the other hand, it is essentially impossible for the nihilist to try to holistically negate these things without relying on a bunk philosophical criteria for meaning and truth, such as verificationism. Yes, BP. Assuming moral nihilists are positivists, then moral nihilists are positivists. Unfortunately for you, moral nihilists are not positivists, and positivism is a subset of verificationism. The other one is a priorism. Okay, so no. Okay. Brainpolice continues. In other words, nihilism cannot be philosophically argued for without at least implicitly falling back on the use of outdated categories and dichotomies. Okay. In other words, a stupid position you made up requires a stupid rationale. Way to go, Brainpolice. And Brainpolice continues. The paradox is that the paradox that the nihilist faces is that they cannot attempt to make such absolute negations without first making a theoretical construction or relying on theoretical constructions that come straight from the very traditions that they wish to transcend. No, that is simply false. I don't rely on morality to argue against morality. Brainpolice continues. The more practical paradox for the nihilist is that no one, including themselves, actually functions as if nihilism made sense. Nihilism in regards to what? If I was a foot nihilist, then it would make no sense to walk, as that requires feet. Right? You're conflating you're conflating of all nihilism into one single position is extraordinarily vague. Okay, but for you, Brainpolice, it is characteristic. Brainpolice continues. In particular, it seems impossible to escape normativity. Every time one casually or philosophically makes an assertion, one is making use of normativity. First off, that is clearly false. Here is some definitions of normative from the freedictionary.com. 1. Implying, creating, or prescribing a norm or standard, as in language normative grammar. 2. Expressing value judgments or prescriptions as contrasted with stating facts, like normative economics. 3. Of, relating to, based on norms. So an example of a non-normative assertion would be, as Spock said, there are bananas. Does this assertion that there are bananas say that there ought to be bananas? No. No, it does not. It is non-normative. And even every day, what seem to be normative claims that I do make are not as normative as it appears. When I say someone should eat healthy, like I say you should eat healthy, I am not saying they ought to desire to achieve good health. I am assuming that they desire good health, and I'm just reminding them of the means to achieve that desire. If they desire to be fat, and they desire all of the things that go along with being fat, I wouldn't have any way to argue against them. I would say, well, if that's what you want, then you should eat a bunch of crap. But again, you should eat a bunch of crap, that's colloquial. So even when people do say you should do X in everyday speech, it's really just describing means to what they think another person wants. And if you want to say, well, you shouldn't want to be fat, well, that's where you get into like objectivism. And I'm not talking about Randianism per se, but that's where you get into like objectivism and theism. Brainpolice continues. Both in terms of arguing for nihilism and the simple matter of everyday behavior, the nihilist has already implicitly and possibly explicitly committed themselves to much of what they seek to deny. That's false. Brainpolice continues. The naive realist dissonance gives way to just another kind of dissonance. I never thought I could say something like this, but Brainpolice managed to misinterpret naive realism, moral nihilism, and Kant's views on metaphysics. Don't misunderstand me, I don't like Kant's metaphysics, and I think naive realists are retarded, but it's like he's not even reading these people's position. And these are not subtle little errors that can be chalked up to casual writing. Brainpolice demonstrates a deep vocabulary, has a general idea of naive realism and nihilism, and Kant's metaphysics and how they relate to each other. Okay, and so I can only come to the conclusion that he's lying. He can't know this much about philosophy and get basic definitions like this wrong. But I can understand him intentionally getting these definitions wrong in order to mischaracterize his enemies. Now, I am not going to go through Brainpolice's personal philosophy. If this is how bad he manages to mangle the positions of others, I can't imagine what his own positive beliefs are.